Conference finals starting with game 1 today.
But Magic and the Lakers hope to end the Blazers' trail and return to the NBA Finals.
And the toughest job in basketball might not be on the court. We'll have the coach's story next on Showtime.
Many different faces, many different hats, flexible. It's a very, very hard job.
Welcome to NBA Showtime. Now, Bob Costas and Pat Riley.
Okay, and here it is, the NBA's version of the Final Four. The conference championships are set. The Trailblazers and the Lakers, Game 1 out west today here on NBC. Then Game 1 of the Eastern Conference Finals tomorrow here on NBC. The Bulls will go against the Pistons, who qualified last night.
And the Pistons, like the Lakers, Bob, I think you're seeing two great teams, two championship teams whose pride and character are beginning to surface. And it was almost like the Lakers back in the 80s when we had to beat Boston to finally get over the hump, and then Detroit had to beat Boston to get over the hump. Portland at 63 wins, Chicago at 61 wins. Their seasons will go down the tube unless they can break through against these two adversaries. And I think it's going to be a great final in the East and the West.
Yeah, it's fitting that in order to prove themselves, they've got to get past that crucible, which has always been the stumbling block to this point. The Pistons have always knocked the Bulls out. The Lakers have always been the guys in the way of the Trailblazers.
Well, both teams are favored. Portland's favored over L.A. by a lot of the experts, and and I think also Chicago would be over Detroit because of the series they had against Boston. But I think a lot of people are picking both Detroit and L.A. to probably break through again.
We'll talk more about the matchups a bit later on. But first, let's go back to last night. Game 6 of the Pistons-Celtics series started out as a blowout, but turned into a playoff thriller. Late first half, Kevin McHale and John Salley in a genteel exchange. The first half was dominated by Joe Dumars' 25 for Detroit. But the Celtics came back from a 17-point deficit. D. Brown flips one up and in over Isaiah, one of several spectacular moves by the rookie. Now, late fourth quarter, Larry Bird, who shot only 4 of 14 from the floor, does nail this J over Dennis Rodman, Boston by 1. Bird finished, though, with only a dozen. Less than a minute remaining in regulation. Game tied at 103. Off a miss by Reggie Lewis, Kevin McHale there for the tip-in, but it's waved off by the officials. McHale called for offensive goaltending. The Celtic bench reacts with disbelief. Might have been the turning point of the game. Here we are in the final seconds of regulation. Boston down by a deuce. Lewis misses, but he's able to hit on the follow. It ties the game at 105 and forces overtime. In the extra session, though, all Isaiah Thomas. Check out this wild three-point bank shot to just beat the shot clock, and the Pistons take a 110-109 lead. The reaction from Chris Ford. Isaiah doing it again in crunch time. Off the pick by Mark Aguirre. He cans the jumper over D. Brown. Isaiah with 8 of his 17 in overtime. Pistons win Game 6, 117-113 to close the series out.
I wasn't trying to necessarily take the game over, but I sensed that everyone was waiting for something to happen, even on all teams, just waiting for something to happen, waiting for somebody to do something. And, in offense, opportunities presented themselves for me to take shots, and I took the shots.
They came out with a lot of emotion. They played very well. They got it going early in the game. Dumars was just unbelievable, but we battled back. We showed a lot of character to fight back. Like I said, that goaltending call just croaked us.
Yeah, he's telling the truth. This takes nothing away from the Pistons. They win it in 6, and the Celtics had their chances in overtime, 5 more minutes to do it. But looking at the replay, there's very little doubt that that basket should have been good.
And this is the second controversial call that Jack Madden made in the playoffs. He waved off a basket by Byron Scott in the Houston series and then was overruled and counted it good. Now we're going to take a look at this basic play again. I mean, it was a goaltending call. Right here from this angle, as you look at the ball coming off the rim, it looks out of the cylinder. The play is good. It's a basket. And it's a shame that you go down all the way to the end, the Boston Celtics, and maybe have that call decide your season.
Two things that have to be said. Jack Madden is one of the excellent veteran officials. He's been around, went to the ABA for a while, NBA, ABA, back in the NBA. He's respected overall. but that call was wrong. It's not a matter of depth perception. Sometimes on replays, I'm always skeptical of replays because depth perception, angle, not there.
Not there.
That was a basket.
It definitely was a call that should have been allowed to be a good basket. But Jack Madden, he will go back and look at the videotape, and he will realize that right there was a big mistake.
All right, well, let's take a quick look now at the Eastern bracket. And it shows the Pistons took 5 games to beat Atlanta. Then last night, they finished off Boston in 6 tough ones. On the top half of the bracket, the Bulls swept the Knicks, then beat Philly in 5 to set the Eastern Conference Final, which begins tomorrow afternoon here on NBC, the Pistons and the Bulls.
Okay, in just a few minutes, we start the Western Conference Finals between the Lakers and the Trail Blazers. Now, let's quickly remind you how these two teams got here. Portland, the top seed in the West, beat Seattle and Utah to advance, while the Lakers swept Houston and then beat the Warriors to make their 9th Western Conference trip, okay, in 12 years. So Dick Enberg and Steve Jones right now are standing out at Memorial Coliseum. And what's going on, fellas?
Well, Pat, I know you must be a single voice and a big crowd back there trying to convince folks that all the rivalries are not on the eastern side of the Mississippi. You know, there's some pretty good play out here as well. In fact, some feel the best of the West will win the NBA this year. Well, we don't need to hype this game. Let's call on some of the experts.
Finally, the world will get to see what has been going on really out here for a long time, but because of Boston, Detroit, because of Boston, Philly, Chicago, Detroit, rivalries that the West really hasn't been getting their due in terms of that, but they'll get to see one well of a series, and people better hold on, put them seatbelts on, because they're going to get to see some marvelous basketball.
And I think it's a good opportunity for our ball club to prove to not only the Lakers, but the world in general, that we control the Pacific Division and we have the team to beat in the West.
So the rivalry is real, and so is the intensity in those faces.
Yeah, there's no question about it, Dick. When we looked and talked to those people, you could see playoff intensity, and this afternoon we're going to see a warrior mentality out here. They're going to go hammer and tong.
It's fun in a big series, Steve, to look at the possible unheard-of heroes previously, and for the Lakers, who emerged? Divac against Houston, and then it was Perkins playing big against the Warriors. Whom do you see in this set?
In this building, historically, the guy that has been the key factor for the Los Angeles Lakers, and not much has been said, has been Byron Scott. Scott has had some sensational shooting games. He's bringing a hot hand into the series. He's on a roll. I'm sure Magic's going to try to get him the ball.
So we've got everything here in Portland.
Well, we got everything like a big prize fight is supposed to have, but Bob, let me tell you something. We have one thing that's missing, and don't get too close to Pat Riley. You might suffer from an Armani meltdown. Pat Riley, all the people are begging for you out here in Portland.
Yeah, you know they want a piece of you in Portland. If they are able to break through against the Lakers this year and get to the final, the only missing piece of satisfaction will be that it will be Dunleavy and not you sweating on the Laker bench.
Well, you know, everybody made their choice and I made mine. But you take a look at the Lakers right now, and a lot of people are favoring the Blazers to win this thing, but there's that special something about that team. It's the mystique, it's magic, it's worthy, it's the story of the 80s. But Magic made an interesting comment yesterday in the press. He said, this game is for players only. And what he's talking about, it's about men. And I think the manhood's going to come out on both teams.
All right, now it's time for this little awkward exchange which takes place weekly. Everybody waiting to see what's going to happen with Pat and the Knicks. And it's my feeling that one way or the other, yes or no, it happens by this time next week, right?
Well, I don't think there's any doubt that Dave Check, he's done all his homework. He's conducted the interviews with the 4 people I think that they're interested in. And obviously this week I think it's going to probably come to some kind of conclusion.
I think it's fair to say, yes, they've done 4 interviews, and they've interviewed Tom Penders, and they've interviewed Mike Fratello and Doug Collins. But really, those guys are the group of second choices. They want you.
I don't know about that.
You're their
really
target.
Don't. I mean, I've been very flattered by a lot of the media coverage when it came to, you know, who is the guy that's supposed to be #1. But from what I understand, Dave has been very thorough, and there are 4 people involved, and I happen to be one of them.
Paul Silas is the other. Most recently, an assistant coach for the Knicks. They talked with Paul Silas.
I think so. I don't know.
But they have negotiated with you without revealing the terms of the negotiations. You have had more extensive talks than had taken place when we spoke here on this show at this time last week.
Yeah, there's been a dialogue as far as the negotiations. They're going on and probably will be concluded with everybody this week. Yeah.
Okay, well, coming up, we'll take a look at coaching and the men who make up the profession. Perhaps he'll be back in it by this time next week. It's a story in 2 parts. It's coming up next on Showtime. Just to clarify something that might have been confusing in the give and take between Pat Riley and myself just before the commercial, Mike Fratello, the former Hawks coach, is among those who have been rumored as a possible coach of the Knicks. He is not among those who have been interviewed. Penders, Collins, Silas, Riley are the four the Knicks have interviewed at this point. Well, as my co-host can attest, coaching an NBA team requires much more than just knowing the X's and O's of the game. A coach manages a team of people who are constantly together for almost 9 months a year. The ebb and flow of a season creates conflicts and controversies. It's the coach's job to keep 12 individuals working and thinking about a common objective. At the same time, he has to maintain credibility with his players as a strategist, motivator, and leader. This past week, we sat down with a number of current and former NBA coaches to discuss the essence of coaching.
An NBA coach is a man who has a lot of courage.
Pressure! Pressure!
At times, he is a confessor when they're having personal problems. They need someone to turn to. He's the guy who has to lead them and give them the direction necessary.
They're not in the game. Get in the game now.
He's got to be a little bit of a father, a little bit of a tough guy, a psychologist.
Let him get the ball in. Clock runs down. Foul him.
An NBA coach is somebody that likes a challenge and doesn't like security.
They have to believe in you as the head coach. They must believe in you in those timeouts, that whatever you're putting on that little board or whenever you're moving those little pieces around, when they come out of the huddle, it's going to work.
Put in a play and make sure it works. Because if it doesn't work, they're going to doubt what you do.
And he's coming on Young, okay?
Right side pass to Vinnie Johnson with 3. Vinnie puts up a 14-footer. Goal! Vinnie Johnson! Oh!
I think there's a misnomer that talent just wins in this league. The talent in this league on teams that are continually contending for a title are guys who have understood exactly what it takes to win and how to win, when to win. But most importantly, they demand discipline, and most of the time they demand it from their coaches.
Up! Let's go! Let's go! Run! Run X!
Many times you're talking to a player that you know can handle it, and you're coming down on him harshly. But really and truly, you're talking to another player. You want to make sure he hears the conversation. And you ask me, how come you don't go directly to that player? He couldn't handle it.
I think every guy's got to be treated a little bit differently. If I holler at John Sally,
John up here!
He can handle it. If I holler at Mark Aguirre, he probably can handle it.
Usually when you would go off, it's what I would call temporary insanity, and it happens. Coaches have to show their players how much they care.
We're not attacking, we're all out of sync, we're all out of position, we're not thinking at all. We're just going through the motions up and down the court. I mean, stay tough. Stay tough. That's what it's about.
You need to be yourself, whatever you are about as an individual, because they read you. These are very, very smart people that read you. They're with you every day. There's so much time spent together. If you try to be something that you're not, you become exposed quickly.
All right, Joe. You go off. 5 gets 1, get it in, all right?
Everybody wants 48 minutes and 48 shots. That's the premise you start with, and it can't exist. Somebody's got to be in this role, someone's got to be in that role, and everybody can't play all the time. And you've got to deal with all these problems.
You got to become a psychologist, because you do have 12 different personalities. You have 12 different dispositions, and they all have to be dealt with differently.
Ball, Tim! That's it. Good work, good work. Time's out. Time is out. 24, good block.
And I felt that when they looked over at the sideline that they saw somebody there that was going to have a decorum of control, and it was something that I thought a lot about and something that I think I became. But I was dying inside. Big time.
I love it, and sometimes I feel that that's where I was born to coach. I mean, that's what I like to do, and the more the pressure, the better I like it.
It's so deep inside certain people, and they're people that probably along the way in their lives, if you ask them, what would you want to do after coaching, they probably wouldn't have a real good answer for you, because they've never taken the time to think about what they'd want to do, because in their mind, all they've ever wanted to do is be a coach.
I don't know what else I would do. Okay? So, you know, you may look at that and say, boy, he's really limited. But you are what you are. You can't be something that you're really not. You can learn, you can adjust, okay? You can make certain adjustments. But basically you are, which I'm a basketball junkie. I always have been.
When we come back, part 2 of this story. We'll hear about some of the games and situations which help define an NBA coach's job. Stay with us. Showtime continues right after this. Okay, in our last segment, we showed you the passion that a coach brings to his profession. Now let's hear about some of the obstacles coaches have to overcome, from bad decisions to player egos to the coach's own ego. It's a job where the coach needs to treat each player and each game at least somewhat differently, all part of what can be a humbling yet rewarding career.
I'm going to make a lot of my colleagues mad. It doesn't take a genius to coach basketball.
Come on, now defense. Half a stride, don't foul ball.
Ego is such a big part of the players being as successful as they are. Ego is such a big part of coaches being successful because you're dealing with these 12 players who have tremendous egos. So if you don't think that you're pretty good at what you do, then how successful can you be?
What's the biggest mistake you ever made as a coach?
Oh, well, I mean, I go back to 1984 when it's my 3rd year as a head coach in the 2nd game against the Boston Celtics in the World Championship Finals. We had a 2-point lead. Kevin McHale was at the free throw line with 16 seconds to go, and I thought for sure he was going to make 2 of them and tie the game. And I had told Magic to call a timeout. He had missed both of those. Magic rebounded the ball, and he takes the timeout that I had called. And I design a play in the back court, which comes inbounds to James Worthy in the infamous pass cross court to Gerald Henderson that got the game into a tie, and then we subsequently lost that game. It was a mistake on my part by assuming that Kevin would miss or make both of those, and really probably cost us that 2nd game in the championship.
If you have a star player in the NBA, you better coexist. I think it's as plain and simple as that.
Don't play for time, play to win. Play to win, right?
I'm not shooting until the final second. Huh? I'm not shooting until the final second. If I make it, we win. If I miss it, we going into overtime. I ain't giving them a chance to shoot it again.
Isaiah has basically made the franchise, let's be honest. I mean, he's a special person in terms of leadership. There isn't any question we've had our problems off and on, but we've always managed to handle it. But basically, I've got to defer to him because he is the star. But I'll never forget last year, we were going through a little tough time. And one night, we walked by each other in the hall after a game, and he said something to me, and I turned to him and I said, "What do you do best?" He said, "Lead." I said, "Then let's go ahead and lead." When you've got a great leader, you better give him his head and let him lead the team, because he's probably going to do a better job than you are, unfortunately.
The star player is much harder to replace than the head coach. There are a lot of guys lined up out there that would like the opportunity to coach an NBA team.
I think if most coaches would be honest with themselves, they would say at one time or another, if they've coached very long, yes, I lost that team. I wasn't able to get them to play up to their ability every game, no matter whether they can make the playoffs or not. And when that happens, that's your responsibility, and you have to accept it as a man.
If you're a team that's experienced and you win, and you've been around each other a long time, you build up what I call the spirit of tolerance, and you understand the spirit of change, and you understand that things aren't always going to be great. And when players or teams begin to drift away from the coach, it's usually for some other agendas other than how he's coaching. It's usually personal more than anything else. And the great teams usually say, hey, that's the way he is. You know, he's intense, he's tough, and but we win, and we will deal with that. And to me, that's a mature basketball team.
If somebody said to you, I guarantee you 5 years of quality personnel with the same team, so for 5 straight years, you'll have as good a chance as anybody to win the NBA title. But every one of those years will cost you a year off your life. 5 years off your life for 5 years of an ideal coaching situation. Would you make the deal?
Take it right away.
Speaks for itself, doesn't it?
You'd lose those 5 years anyhow, even if they didn't make a contract with you, I'll tell you what.
Take the 5 years off your life.
That's right.
So in your case, they're dwindling fast. They're coming out of both sides of the hourglass in your case, my friend. Just to clarify that point you made about the coaching mistake, Had McHale made both free throws, you wanted that timeout in that 84 playoff against the Celtics, because then you set up a play offensively to break the tie. But when he missed them and Magic got the rebound, the ball's in the hands of the guy you want. So you don't want a timeout. You want to make them foul him or he dribbles out the clock.
Very astute.
Thank you. Do I get to coach the Knicks? Dick Enberg and Snapper Jones standing by in Portland. We'll see you at halftime.